Welcome to another episode of the Own Your Life podcast. I'm Christine Wilson, and we are here with Melody. We are really excited to talk to you today about being a parent and nutrition. But really, first I was like, let's talk about being a mom and nutrition. But then I was like, honestly, this relates to men too. And so I just know as a mom of littles how hard it is to really work on my nutrition and make sure that their meals are healthy. And so I just want us to have a conversation about what that looks like of changing my life and working on my nutrition while also not having kids that are not eating their dinner every night, or, the constant battles of food with toddlers already, even with processed food, but what that looks like with eating real food, But I think I heard you say this one time. What was it? I quoted you. I wrote it down and quoted you. I heard you tell a mom once that part of why nutrition is so hard for moms specifically or parents in general is because we make decisions, why it's so hard for us, our nutrition, is because we are so decision fatigued because we make decisions for everyone else all day long. And then when it comes to our meals and trying to eat healthy foods for us, we get to our meals and we're like, I just don't even care. I just want to eat whatever's sitting on the counter.
Yeah, you eat what's left over on your kid's plate.
Yeah. And when you said that, I was like, that's a really good way to say it. Like, it's decision fatigue. Like, yeah. I don't want to make a decision on what I have to eat in meals.
Well, how many times have you got to the end of the day and you are mentally exhausted because you've been
honestly.
Every single
day.
So
sorry, but it's every day.
It's every single day. And, for me, it's been, my oldest is 30.
Yeah.
That's weird, right?
Yeah, that is weird.
So he's 30. And then my youngest is, of my children, she's 27. Okay. And so, I got 30, 29, 27. And then our last one at home, my stepson, he's 20. So, these people are, and my stepdaughter's 27, but these people are eating, on their own now. Yeah. But before, when they were little, when my kids were little, I would just eat the leftover fish sticks and the leftover peas and tater tots, because by the end of deciding for them all morning long, what are you going to have for breakfast, what they were going to wear, the battle of what they were going to wear, whether they're going to wear the same two shoes or mismatched shoes, that's the middle one always. Mm-hmm. And by the time you get to the meal, you're like, I don't want to decide what I'm going to eat. I'm just too tired. Yeah. And you end up picking, or not eating. Not eating was sometimes something that just happened because you're so exhausted. So you're not nourishing yourself first. And then you just end up in that space where I got nothing left to give.
Yeah, literally. I've had to make a rule for myself that I don't eat lunch until the kids go down for their naps. And I'm so thankful that they still take naps and all that. But because I have to tell myself, don't eat until after they go down, because I'll end up just eating their leftovers, or I'll end up eating crappy food, honestly, processed food. I'll just eat whatever is there. And it's not even, maybe it's even a healthier version of the processed food, but it's still, the volume of just sitting there and you're like, oh, I'm so hungry. So you just keep eating it, keep snacking on it. And so I had to tell myself, no, when they go down, that's when you can warm up your good meal prepped meal that you either bought from Dale or made yourself or Atomic Meals or something. And then I can sit down and eat it, because I'll actually sit down and eat a healthy meal.
Yeah, because when your kids are small, and everybody with kids knows this, that sitting down for a meal is almost like that's a battle in itself, just to get everyone to sit down when they're of a certain age, because they're busy. They don't want to sit down. That's not the thing. So it's really hard for you to sit down and eat too. Yeah. And that's part of, for us as adults, even for kids, but for us as adults especially, is to have that meal time be a little more relaxed so we can digest. It's really hard when our kids are small or when there's a battle at every meal. So I don't know. I think that's a good plan, to wait till they take a nap. Yeah. Luckily, you're still in that nap stage. Yes. I think when that part's over, it becomes a whole other thing though, right? Yeah, I
agree. Yeah. It was funny that during the nutrition challenge, there was a challenge that was like chew your food slow or take your time or something like that. And Mike and I were joking so much about how we were like, well, we're forced to take our time because we can only get one bite in every 10 minutes of the kids.
Yeah.
We're like, they're just running around. We're trying to get them to sit down and eat some protein, eat some good food. So we're fighting every bite. And we're like, it's taking us 45 minutes to get through the meal. So this is great. We're great for this challenge.
Yeah. Yeah. I can chew my food slow because I get one bite every 5 minutes.
Yeah. So let's talk about what nutrition looks like for kids. And this is all ages. I mean, like obviously this goes into adulthood. This isn't just for like people like me with littles. But when does nutrition start being important?
When you're pregnant. Before you're pregnant. Before you're pregnant.
The chicken or the egg.
Yeah, the chicken or the egg. No, it's actually, that's a really good question because for kids, they're just little people, they're just smaller versions of it. They're just smaller humans. That's it. It's not any different for them than it is for us.
Yeah.
It's really no different. It's just amounts are different. And of course, they're picky sometimes. And we have to bargain with these people, these irrational little beings who don't want to eat their food sometimes, which is really weird because I love to eat food.
I know, right?
I always think it's really weird. Like, this is the only time in your life where you're going to fight sleep. What? And you're going to fight being fed. Like, at no other time in your life will this be an issue, right?
Yeah.
So it begins. Honestly, for a child, it begins before they're even conceived because it starts with the parents. And that's something that, when I heard a lecture several years ago on this because background story. A lot of people know that we had some issues with my stepson. Being able to concentrate, and food was a big part of that. We had the autism spectrum term thrown around, and we were looking at, wow, this person is never going to leave our house if we don't do something because we're not sure if he's going to be able to function. Side note on that, he leaves for the Air Force on the 21st of the, on the 17th of this month. And so obviously he's functioning pretty well.
Yeah.
But, it started with food with that. And we were looking at this and I was trying to learn about it. And in this lecture, I heard a nurse practitioner say that after some studies were done, that it wasn't just the mother's nutrition that mattered, which is that's what we always think, right? You got to eat for growing a baby. But her research that she had brought to this lecture showed that the dad's nutrition mattered just as much because it's a combination of DNA, right? So you got dad, you got mom, two different DNA pools coming together, and if one is less healthy, then that's a chance that baby might be a little less healthy. So it really starts with the parent's nutrition, which that was really eye-opening to me when I heard that, because we always talk about the mom's nutrition. We don't often talk about the dad's nutrition and that kind of contribution to the making of a child, you know?
That's really interesting. So I think one thing that I would think a lot of people struggle with, like, okay, like I'm starting brand new. I want to start eating healthy. How do I start implementing that in our lives with our kids? Like, let's say I have really picky eaters, and this is at any age, again, like whether they're little or they're a little older. And now let's talk about the strong-willed children, right? Who will just not eat for 3 days because they're unhappy, like with what's on their plate. But like, how do I practically handle that?
Well, those are really good questions, because it's all easy to sit here and say, but it's very complicated in actual application when you're in your home with a screaming child, right? Because that stresses everybody out. Yeah. And as a mom, what do you want to do? Or as a parent, a dad, doesn't matter, parent.
Yeah, the parent,
you want to fix it. The first thing I would say is, just like we talked about, it's really important, mom and dad's nutrition before we come together and have babies. As that baby is coming into the world and starting to eat real food rather than just nursing, then introduction of food is really important, because just like us, they're just little humans. If we start off on a high carb diet, what are we going to want more of? Our blood sugar is going to go up. It's going to crash. We're going to want more carbs, more sugar. And kids are the same way.
Yeah.
So if we start them off, and this was what was so bad, and I know probably a lot of people, parents listening, this might have been your experience too, but my pediatrician always said, start them off with rice cereal, the rice cereal. And if I look back at that now, I'm like, that was the literal worst thing
It literally is
that
the
we
worst
could
advice.
have ever done. That's honestly the worst piece of advice you could give a new mom.
It's true.
It's so
and
bad.
promising that they would sleep better if you gave them that too.
Yeah, because what they do. Well, now we know why.
Yeah.
Their little blood sugar went way up, and then they crashed, and then they passed out.
Yikes.
Scary, right?
And like newborns. No.
Yeah.
Like young babies.
Like we're talking like if you've got, with my first Casey, he's 30 now. When he was not sleeping, my doctor, my pediatrician said, go ahead and get a little bit of rice cereal and mix it up with the formula, because they told me it was better to do formula at that time. It was
talk about that.
1993. So better to do formula, and mix it up with that. Take a hot needle, make the nipple a little bit bigger, let him have that. He'll go right to sleep.
My brain.
And now I'm like, I can't. That started us off on a really bad path.
Well, even in 2019 when we had our daughter, I think our kids were great sleepers. I really do. But they're still infants. They're still learning how to sleep. And people would tell me and give me that advice, well, why don't you just give her some more formula? Why don't you just do more formula? And for me, in my story of breastfeeding and formulas, I ended up just not making enough. So I would exclusively pump, and we would, supplement with formula with both kids, actually, at just different times. And so like I wasn't against formula. Like I'm so grateful that there are options for people like me who just couldn't supply enough, right? But people were literally making formula this magical thing as if it was so much more nutritious than the literal milk that your body makes for this specific baby and its needs.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it just amazed me. Like I was just like,
it's mind-blowing.
That's not the solution for everything.
No.
I thought it was really interesting when you were talking about just what that introduction of food looks like for kids too, because again, with our, when you only have one kid, right, you can focus a lot more on those things and you're a lot better at creating good habits earlier on. But we used to give Maddie strips of steak when she was 6 months old, and she would just suck on them.
Yeah.
And she would suck all the vitamins. It was gross. That piece of steak afterwards was just bone dry.
Yeah.
And it's really funny now because she will literally eat 8 ounces of steak. She eats more steak than me, like at a meal. That's what
crazy.
She asks for. Dad, can I have steak tonight?
And she's, say how old she is.
She's 3.5.
Okay.
Like, yeah, I forgot about that part. Like, what? Now, and our son, honestly, like, I hate to admit this because my husband pointed it out one day and I was like, I hate to admit you're right. But we didn't do it as well with James. We didn't give him a lot of steak strips or even, I think we gave him probably more chicken, which is funny because now he's obsessed with chicken.
Okay.
But even at 2 and 3.5, those habits that we tried to create earlier on are already showing, and it's just very interesting to see the difference of that, of like, what did we introduce early with Maddie? Okay, now what did we introduce early with James? And what were we good at, like, creating those habits? And
I know.
Yeah.
It's really hard because I look back and I'm like, golly, if I knew then, and we always say this, right,
know,
with
right?
the parenting, if I knew then what I know now, everything would have been different. But what I know now is how I introduced food really affected my oldest son because he ended up with asthma.
Mm-hmm.
And so we had the situation where, they introduced formula, told me at the hospital, they brought me a flat of formula. I think I've told you this story. They brought me a flat of formula, the kind you just crack it open, screw the nipple on, here you go. No fuss, no muss, right? So I was like, okay, I'm young. It's 23. I'm like, no, wait, it's 2023. This was 1993. I am about to be 52 on Sunday. So it's been a while.
Early birthday.
So they bring this to me, and automatically I'm like, okay, I try breastfeeding, and I'm like, first time mom, I'm like, this is really hard.
Like, well, this sucks. I don't want to do this.
This is really hard. I can't get, the latching, the things like that.
The time.
The being nervous about being a first time mom, being really young. I think I was like 22 when he was born.
Wow, that is
and
young.
It's pretty young. And so just going through all of that, I was like, yeah, the formula seems like a plan. And I did that. Well, lo and behold, the formula was making him projectile vomit. I mean, it was like The Exorcist. we were bringing clothes for him, clothes for me. Everywhere I went, I had a set of clothes for both of us, maybe 2 or 3. And sometimes had to just go home because everybody that's ever had it happen.
We had thrower uppers.
Yeah, you're like, this child is possessed.
Stop throwing up.
Right. So, going through that, and then what they said, my doctor at the time, switched to soy formula. Oh, okay.
Oh, he's allergic to milk.
Yeah, he's allergic to milk.
Whatever.
That's what's going on. So let's switch him to soy. Now we know a lot about soy, and which was a huge mistake. It's a huge allergen. We ended up with, all of these allergies, all of this asthma that we dealt with. When he was little, he actually couldn't complete a half day at kindergarten without an asthma attack. So that's kind of where I really started being like, what is going on with this? And the soy formula, I just stopped doing that. Yeah. I started figuring other stuff out. I honestly can't even remember what I did at this point because it's so long ago, and you're just panicked as a parent because I'm thinking he's starving to death because he's just throwing everything up and he's going to be malnourished. And the funny thing is, well, not really funny, but the sad thing is with that way of getting him on food, he was malnourished already. Wow. Malnourished just means that you're not receiving the proper nourishment. So that's where we were at. So we've got this allergy that's happened, and now this asthma, and now, it's just this cascade effect of what the food, and what I know now, these are all foodborne problems. And so, my second one, I really worked on the breastfeeding. We got that. Third one, did that. No allergies.
Wow.
No allergies. So, no asthma. So that's the real difference. And then the introduction of like whole foods or solid foods, it was so bad because, you're just like canned baby food. And honestly, for me, I would pop open and the meats grossed me out, man. So I'd pop that open and think, I'll do it for you, but this stinks really bad.
Yeah.
And so what did I do? I ended up like, oh, he likes bananas better. So I'm just feeding my child bananas and sweet potatoes, and I'm really not getting him the proper protein.
All puree too, so you're not even like thinking about what's in it or anything like that.
No. So, if I could go back talking about how we introduce food, I would start with, my daughter-in-law and my daughter, they've got it down, man. They introduce egg yolks, like slightly cooked, soft egg yolks. They've even done pureed liver, which I know, but
I'm like, I don't know if I want that, but
kids,
props to them. They don't know.
But kids, they only know what you give them.
That's good, yeah.
So if you don't ever introduce that sweet taste at first, then that signal isn't going off in the brain saying, I need more of that sweet taste. Now, I didn't have that information growing up. My grandmother, this is awful. Okay. So my grandmother actually suggested to me that I could give Casey, my oldest one, she said, you could get some evaporated milk and put some sweetened condensed milk, and he would love that. I'm so glad I didn't do that. So sweetened condensed, like Eagle brand milk.
Yeah, yeah,
Can we
yeah.
say that? I don't know. It's a brand. But
I don't think we're big enough to get in trouble.
Yeah, we're not going to get in trouble. So the sweetened condensed milk, like you make a pie with.
Yeah, literally.
My grandmother
my
gave
gosh.
that to my mom's oldest brother when
They're like, they ate it up.
Yeah, he loved
of
it.
course.
He loved it.
So
of course he did.
Here's one thing that I have a big question on. So with like baby-led, not weaning, feeding, now I'm blanking, whatever, feeding, introducing kids to solids, like it's at 6 months when you're allowed to do that. A lot of, baby-led weaning, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
A lot of what they preach, at least what I have experienced, this is probably not, everywhere. What I've experienced, they've said, introduce everything essentially at one time. And so they'll say, have your protein, have your dairy, have your carb, have your fat, whatever, but also have the sweets on the plate. And part of that is so that they don't see, let's just use cookies as an example. So put the cookies with the meal so that they don't see cookies as this all high and mighty of, I want cookies, for dessert always. So they're always asking for cookies, but instead like offering the sweet with the meal. And so that's just kind of what I started out as, is like I would give them an entire plate of 4 options of things. One would be protein, obviously the thing I want them to eat, maybe one that I would really like them to eat, but it's not that big a deal. And then one thing that they would like, and then like a sweet or something like that. That's a bad example, but do you know what I mean? Just kind of trying to be, offer them all of it. So I want to talk about that because lately we've been trying to reverse that and offer what we want them to eat first, at least saying like putting a plate of protein in front of our kids and literally being like,
right,
without adding. So anyways, I want to talk about that because I want to see like what your thoughts are on all that of like offering sweets with the meal and how to kind of honestly even handle sweets with kids in general, because obviously I think we're all could sit here and say sugar is not good for you, right? Like we can all blatantly say that candy's not good for you, cookies are not good for you. So how do we kind of like handle that?
Well,
in a world that says to do that.
Now, to be fair, I've been out of this game for a long time, but I do have grandkids.
I would say you are very wise in all this. I trust you a lot.
My first question would be, why offer them sweets at all? Why would we do that?
Okay, so I'm going to play devil's advocate.
Okay, go ahead.
So I want to offer them sweets because I don't want them to be the weirdos. I want them to be able to go to a birthday party. I want them to be able to eat the cake. I want them to also not eat cake and then absolutely explode. But maybe that's inevitable no matter what, as I'm saying that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't want them to be weird. I don't want them to be the weird kids that don't eat candy.
Right, because, okay.
Or sweets or whatever.
Right.
I know, I'm kind of throwing this at you. I did not prep Melody for this.
No, we went to a birthday party, one of my grandkids' birthday party. And one of the grandmothers on the other side of the family, she was handing out the cake. And she's a great grandmother on the other side. And
she really doesn't have to take care of the kids after the crash.
She doesn't have to do a thing. And so she's handing cake out, and she goes to hand it to Steve and I and my husband, and we both go, "Oh no, thank you." And she goes, "What? Didn't your mom teach you to eat cake?" And I was like,
I can't believe
first of all, when you're
only
over
a
when you're over a certain age, you can say whatever you want.
That's so true.
But I thought, that's so funny because didn't your mom teach you to eat cake? And I was like, yeah, my mom did. And that's how I got really, really unhealthy in the first place was my mom always had that stuff around. We always had good food too, but that was also always available. So as a human, we're hardwired to seek comfort. Comfort equals like that dopamine hit. It makes us feel so good, when we get that dopamine hit. And that's what the sweet stuff does. It's natural as a human to crave carbohydrates if we start getting carbohydrates. It's a natural fail-safe to keep us alive because carbohydrates in nature are so hard to find. And so when we find them, we don't have that shut off valve. So there's no brakes on that food. So when we're dealing with kids who don't have the ability to actually rationalize those things and say, I understand this is a no breaks food. And if I eat it, I'm going to want more. So I'm going to have to back up and say, how do I say no to this when I really want it? And know that this is a brain like chemical reaction. Also, my blood sugar's getting all messed up, but let's just go with the brain chemical reaction. Stimulates the same place in the brain that drugs do, like that's cocaine. Crazy. So the first time I ever heard sugar described as kitty cocaine was back in the 90s, and it was the actress Mary Lou Henner said it, and I actually met her, and she signed my book. But and y'all might not even know who that is.
Nope, but yeah, I wasn't going to say it.
The show Taxi, Mary Lou Henner, she wrote a book. I had it. It had a lot of information I do not agree with now, but there was the kitty cocaine thing, and that set me on a path. I was like, yeah, as an adult with my kids, I was like, yeah, okay, sugar, no more. But if we as adults want it more and more and more, so will kids. They're not going to have that ability to understand what's going on because they're not rational yet. We know that, right? They're irrational. I mean, I've got a grandson that refuses to put his shoes on the right feet. He wants to wear them on the wrong feet. And if you say, hey, you could run faster if you put them on the right feet, he's like, no. And it's just like, because he has that ability to say no to you about that, he's using that. He's like, that's my power right now. It's my superpower.
It's a literal superpower.
And it's a superpower, my word no. But with carbohydrates and things like that, we're talking about sweets, it's really hard for a kid to understand what's happening. And so then that's when they want it again. We get that screaming child. We get the out of control because it's a drug. Let's be honest, it's a drug. It really, honestly, 100% is. And I felt the same about my kids when I took them off of that because it was in the 90s. They were all small. I think Abby, my daughter, was in kindergarten, and I pulled everybody off of sugar. And, now, Now also, hey, let's go a little fast forward. We're homeschooling. So in the 90s, so you're really a weirdo.
You're going hard.
So I'm going hard after the weirdo. So we've been, I have been there in that situation. And in those situations, I just let them do it at parties. But I look at it now and I'm like, it would have been easier maybe if I hadn't made it a part of their daily routine to have a sweet, because I always had dessert after a meal because
we did too growing up.
Yeah, growing up we always had dessert.
Just what you had.
My mom always had pies and cakes and stuff around, and I did the same. And then when I stopped doing that, I started figuring out, wow, my kids are acting a little less crazy, and I realized I'm feeling a little bit better too, and then we can, they're going to sleep easier. They're sleeping better through the night. And I realized with that kitty cocaine word or phrase, I had taken my kids off of drugs. And it was really interesting watching their behavior. And then, of course, what was weird is that then when you see them have some, you really see that you see the monster come out. And I'm like, wow, that was happening to their little body every time. Yeah. They were going through that every single time I let them have it. And I understand the not wanting them to feel weird. I totally get that because as a mom, you're like, I don't want my kid to be the smelly kid in class, the weirdo in class, or among their friends.
Life's hard enough.
Yeah,
let's
shoot.
Try not to make them weirder.
Yeah, let's try. But long story short, you asked me about that introduction. I introduced it at first. I had to go back and undo it. And then, it wasn't always perfect. I did it again with my stepson. He was already we were doing apple juice. And these aren't like things that people consider like candy or sugar. We were on sugar, as much sugar just with regular food. Yeah. Cereal, apple juice, granola bars, all these things. And when
these healthy things.
Healthy things full of sugar. When we backed off of all of that and we started introducing the food we wanted him to eat, we had a lot of tears at the table. And he was 12. It was really hard because he just refused to eat. Yeah. And I was like, I guess I was old enough at this point. I was like, all right, don't eat.
Yeah.
So the same food will be here for you tomorrow when you're ready to eat. It lasted, probably we went back and forth. It lasted about a week or so, really. And that's about the time that I'll say that the sugar withdrawal takes a week to 2 weeks to get reset. Yeah. And then they start acting like real people again.
Are you sure?
Yeah. So, food introduction, what I experienced, especially with Steven, my stepson, is that we found what he would eat and we just let him eat it every single meal. And some people were like, doesn't he need variety? And I'm like, you didn't ask me about when I was feeding him sugar, should he not be on sugar? So yeah, he can have variety when he's ready. But right now he's the most nutrient dense foods that he likes. I'm going to let him have those as much as he wants because now he's at least getting nutrients and he's also acting better. Win-win.
Yeah. Huge.
So it was bacon and eggs. That's all he wanted. That's all we had. I just fixed an enormous amount of bacon and eggs for 2 weeks. And then he was fine. And then he started eating whatever we put down on the table. And it was a completely different household. It was really pretty awesome.
That documentary on sugar.
Yeah.
I'm forgetting what it's called.
That Sugar Film.
Okay. Yeah. I was like, it's something sugar.
Yeah, it's pretty simple.
That sugar film. Okay. So one of the most impactful parts for me was watching them talk about the adrenaline rush you have when you eat sugar. And I like the way they just drew it. I don't know, it just kind of connected and clicked in my brain. And I was literally telling Mike that I was like, that makes so much sense for me even because I've always been, I love desserts. I love candy. All my friends growing up knew that I was just the candy eater. I always had candy around and it's been a hard habit to break to not eat candy and sugar and sweets. I've always loved sweets. And again, I grew up in a family where we had dessert almost every night, and it was just really interesting to me to watch him talk about how your adrenaline crashes. And when your adrenaline crashes after eating that sugar, that's why you want more. Because I would almost just binge on carbs in general. And I'm sure a lot of people can relate to that. And it's hard to talk about of being like that. I wouldn't say I was a binge eater, but there were points in my life where I was like, why can't I stop eating this? I would get so hungry. And so I would just literally eat every carb that I could see and everything in front of me. And most of the time it was sugar. Most of the time it was unhealthy carbs. And I really realized I'm not a binge eater. I was just starving for all the correct nutrients. I wasn't eating nearly enough protein. I wasn't eating the healthy fats. I wasn't even eating the healthy carbs. You know what I mean? So I would get so hungry. And at the end of the day, I would then feel like I'm binging because I was just trying to eat everything. And I was like, that just clicked in my brain of just that adrenaline of, okay, I'm hungry. Let me just eat something small that's right in front of me, and then I'll eat dinner in a minute. It would go up. My blood sugar would crash, right? I mean, I always heard that growing up, oh, your blood sugar's low, this or that, or
right.
all of that. But it never truly clicked that it's my adrenaline that is literally shooting up, shooting down, and making me say, well, I got to eat more. I got to eat more of this to make it, whatever.
You
and then
literally get high.
Yeah. And then I find, literally.
Yeah.
And so then I find myself 5 packets of fruit snacks deep. And I'm just like, what in the world is wrong with me? What has possessed me to eat all these fruit snacks? But it's because my adrenaline and it's that sugar. And I don't have a lot of study. You may know about this, about the red dye 40 and all that stuff. I know that's a lot of coming up recently. But we didn't have much in our house when I really started learning about this. It was literally fruit snacks. That's really what we had, which were an easy, just toss it.
Yeah.
But I told my husband, I was like, I think that could be, I was reading what kind of that red dye 40, and again, the processed sugar can really how affect you. And it was talking about how your kids might just be hyperactive or angry, or obviously just not these all bad emotions, but it took everything up to the next level to then they were reacting poorly to all these emotions. Right.
Right.
And I said that about me. I was like, I haven't been feeling very good. And I, in the last year and a half, have been really working on my nutrition and hormones and getting those balanced. But when I started taking out those little extras of things like red dye 40, I realized my need, or like I guess just anger issues. It's hard to admit, but anger issues really started kind of coming down. My patience started going up. I felt like I could start processing things a little clearer. And I think red dye 40 and sugar, I'm assuming is
they
again,
almost
I don't know
go
a lot
hand
of it.
in hand because they're in the same product.
Exactly, they're in the same product.
So they put sugar in it, they put dye in it. If it's got a color, there's a dye in it. Almost
always, yeah.
Yeah, and you just go down the cereal aisle, pull a box that has any kind of like color in it, you're probably going to see red dye. The problem with that, like what you said, is it does increase anxiety, irritation, irritability. It's really connected with any of those autism kind of spectrum issues that kids have. But you add that with the sugar, right? And then that adrenaline, because it's a cortisol response. So you have this blood sugar issue. What happens is it puts your body in a state of emergency. There's too much sugar in the blood. That's a state of emergency. Your body goes, releases adrenaline because we got to figure this out. And so anytime our body gets into that state of emergency, where we're out of homeostasis, then it gets into that fight or flight. We get angry. We get, once it's over though, we get that depressed. So it's almost like that big letdown. So it's so much like an addict of another substance that we would say, oh, that's terrible that person is on drugs. We are also on drugs when we're doing that, right? We just don't equate it like that because it's legal. That's really all it is. It's legal drugs that we can give our kids. And what's scary is it's in most of their packaged food. So when we look at a kid's meal, kids' food items on the shelf, and we see so much sugar, so much dye, you have to ask yourself, like, what is going on? Do they not know?
Yeah.
Are they ignorant? Are food producers ignorant to it, oblivious to it? Or do they not care? Or do they know? Like, what's worse? I don't even know what's worse. I'm at a loss with that because we know that these studies are coming out, but these things are still in packaged foods for kids, and it's very
especially
damaging.
in America,
right?
Which amazes me the more I learn of how many foods are not approved in other countries that are approved in America. I'm just like, how is that even a thing?
Right?
Like how are we allowed to eat these foods and these other countries have?
Yeah, they have a rule against it.
Like,
right? They can't put red dye in food. Period. So, but here we got it like next time you're at the store, just go through the grocery aisle, pick up a product and see if it's got red dye. If it's colored, probably going to have red dye in it. And so the issue with that, what you mentioned about like the anger, and just your emotions being out of control. So if we know that happens to us, and then that stuff is in kids' foods, and then we have kids with problematic behavior, well, maybe we take those foods out and see what happens, right? But the other thing that goes along with that is that it also destroys gut health. So the gut is where our emotions are made. So the interesting thing about kids with like that autism spectrum, what I learned a long time ago is that if you were to look inside of our small intestine, it's got the little villi, these little hairs. They look like little hairs. They should be wavy like waves of grain, right? They're out there. They're like, oh, there's a nutrient. They grab it and they send it through the intestinal lining and send it to where it needs to go in the body. Yeah. Kids with that particular issue, typically when they have looked at their intestines, it's flat. like it's been trampled on or rolled over with a steamroller. It's not wavy. There's not as many villi in there because there's millions of them, and they're like laying flat. They're not receptive to nutrients. It's like they've been trampled. Yeah. The first thing when I heard that, I was like, oh, that is so interesting, because that means that they're not able to even grab those nutrients. Their gut's not working well. If their gut's not working well, and that's where I started putting two and two together. If that's not working well, and that's where emotions are made with the gut-brain connection, no wonder they're crying all the time, or stressed, or anxious, or angry, or depressed. And it's just, it's that thing of we kind of know what we're experiencing emotionally a lot of times as adults, but kids don't really have a handle. They don't know how to describe their emotions sometimes. Yeah. And so they're just trying to battle through this in the dark, kind of, because they don't know why they feel the way they feel. And as parents, it's really our job to do this investigation and figure it out. But we haven't been given the right tools. Luckily, well, I say luckily, the internet's a wonderful, terrible place, right? It's like full of all this great information, but also full of all this information that can lead us astray or bad information, just, false information. Yeah. And it's a place where I found out a lot about this stuff and started being able to actually look at studies. Like, I'm not a doctor like Doc here, where we're using his office. Yeah. I don't have access to those medical journals, but I do now, because a lot of that stuff is online. Yeah. So you can go and find those things out. But parents, let's be honest, you don't have time to do that. Yeah. When do you have time to go read medical journals or studies? Like, hardly ever. Yeah. So that didn't happen for me until later. So for me, it was a little too late for my children in their early life. But now, believe me, now they're into it now. They actually do their own research. My daughter and my daughter-in-law have taught me more about vaccinations and things like that I didn't know, because at least now I've been able to give that curiosity to them. Like, let's find out what this stuff is before we just accept everything as parents that the doctor says to be. Not that doctors are bad, but some of them, they're not all like Doc. Yeah. So, sometimes we're getting bad information, like start your baby off with rice cereal.
Well, I mean, that's how I feel. I mean, even in just the pelvic floor health world, you know what I mean? With women even of them, through labor and delivery I was literally thinking the other day of just how trusting I was when I went in to have my babies. And it's not that the medical system is wrong or bad. It's just not everybody is educated, and I don't agree with everything. You know what I mean? Like, now looking back, I'm like, there's just so much I wish I would have had the gut to just stand up and say, I don't agree with that, or I don't know about that, or can I ask more questions about that? Because I just don't understand. Like, the amount of shots I got during pregnancy, even I couldn't tell you what they put in my body. Like, I have no idea what they put in my arm. You know what I mean? I mean, to be honest, and I'm not saying that they're all bad or they're all wrong, but because I literally can't remember what they were, but but it's like, it's even just that of just like, we're so trusting because we are exhausted moms and we're parents, and we're just sitting there. We're just like, okay, well, this person said to do this, so I'm just going to start doing it and see if it works. And so it is hard to do that research, but it's also so beneficial to do our research and to look into that and be able to say, you know what, I am going to just push back, even if it's just for me to learn. Even if this is good for my kid, I need to push back so that I can learn and share that knowledge with others. And I think that's what you're doing now, is just sharing the knowledge now with others. Hey, I didn't do the research when I had little kids, but let me help now, which that's why I ask you all my food questions. I always feel so bad. I'm like, I'm going to text Melody this.
No, I don't ever feel bad.
I'm like, it's hard. It's hard. You're exhausted. You're worn out. You're trying to do 1,000 things. But that foundation of nutrition in ourselves, but especially our children, like, man.
Well, we talked about kids and being picky, and sometimes their pickiness, and I remember my dad saying this all the time, and and I see it now with my grandkids and stuff, is that when they're being picky or they're saying no, they're at that stage where they're just trying to figure out who they are.
That's so true.
They're trying to figure out what am I? What can I do? And understand that. And my dad would always say, understand, they're just trying to, I'm going to call him out, especially with my middle one, Cassidy. He'd be like, okay, Melody. Now, you need to figure out how to control him, but not break his spirit. And I would always think, well, I don't know what in the world that means. So, because I want to break something, because he's middle. He was my wild one, He was even as a little person. So even one thing now that people don't do, I had a walker, and people don't even do that now. I realized with my grandkids that that's not a thing anymore because it messes up their ability to learn how to walk. And I was like, well, dadgummit. We just made mistakes all over the place.
But we all do too.
Yeah. So, he was in this walker, and there was a commercial on TV at the time for a DuPont Stainmaster carpet or whatever. And it was this little baby running through the house like so fast in the walker. And just stuff was flying everywhere. And it was about the carpet being stain resistant. And I was like, that's my child. So, because he would be in the walker and you would just be like, wherever his hands would touch, there was chaos and destruction. And it was so funny because if he was missing when he started crawling, it was like,
it wasn't good.
Where's Cassidy?
It's too quiet in here.
Yeah,
we gotta go find him.
It's too quiet. He literally would peel off stuff. Like I had his wallpaper. His room was wallpapered, and I had crayons like where they were falling on the wall. He literally stood and climbed in his crib and peeled all of the crayons off the wall, and it was just the paper backing. And so he was that kid, and so trying to figure out with a kid, a strong-willed kid or any kid, all kids are strong-willed because at one point they're going to assert themselves, and that's natural.
Yeah.
And when they do it, what's the easiest thing they can do it with? Food. So sometimes it's not even that they don't like it. It's that they're testing you as a parent. They're like, how far can I go?
Yeah.
And my dad would say that. He's testing you. He's seeing how far he can push you till you break. Yeah. And you have to be consistent. And I remember just thinking being consistent is exhausting. It's just exhausting. And then that thing that I probably have said it to my kids, but they're not little forever. And at one point, that consistency is going to pay off. But it's really, really hard, and it feels like an eternity while you're doing it. Yeah. And
especially
I understand
sitting at the
that.
dinner table when they're screaming at you because
dinner feels 5 hours long, right? You're like, you feel crazy. You feel like, am I taking crazy pills? Yeah. And you want to fix it, and sometimes you can't. And that's just something that you learn to accept, I think, as a parent, is that you can't fix everything when your kids are upset. You can only provide them with the things that are best for them. And, not to get into a too spiritual, but, we as kids, sometimes we don't know what's best for us and we're told no. And we have to endure the no that we hear, and we have to allow just things to take its process. That's good. Yeah. So even our kids, I always look at it like that, it's that same kind of relationship. They don't know what's good for them sometimes. Because as a parent, somebody said this to me a long time ago. As a human, we see life like an open book like this, but a higher power might see it like this, whole picture. And we can only see this much. Same thing as a parent. Your kids, they're just looking right here. You're like, I'm seeing the whole picture of what's going on. And right now, you want a cookie. You don't want your meat, your protein. That's not good for you. Yeah. So it becomes a battle of the wills sometimes, but not not always even because they don't like it, but just because that is the nature of a child to start finding themselves. Yeah. And it's very difficult in the moment, though.
Yeah. Well, let's wrap up by, I want you to give a couple suggestions of like, okay, I'm deciding to change my life, take out sugars, take out all that. Like, what are some practical steps, especially with a mom with littles, but with any age? What are some practical steps of things that I can do to start transitioning my children to eating healthier and eating? Is it cold turkey, you know what I mean? Or is it slow changing their meals? You know what I mean? So like, what's just a few suggestions of like, hey, you could take this out, you could start changing this, start doing that, of how to have a healthier family.
Well, I think the very first thing that we did, and I'll just go off what we did with Steven, is we took out cereal in the morning. Mm-hmm. Cereal and apple juice were where we were at. Mm-hmm. It was convenient. It was easy. He liked it. He didn't complain. I could pour it in the bowl, put the milk, here's your juice, and I could go about what I was doing. Mm-hmm. I didn't have to worry about it. When we changed that, it was a little bit of a struggle. Mm-hmm. But the first meal of the day actually sets anybody, kid, parent.
And that's the hardest. Yeah. For me, that is the hardest meal to get them to eat, or me to eat, to be honest.
And so first meal of the day, literally, is the meal that sets you up for success for the day. So it's breaking that overnight fast, right? So telling your body that it's getting enough protein. We talk about all the time as an adult how important it is to get enough protein in your morning meal. Why don't we look at our kids the same? So true. It's so important for them. They're just little us, right? Mm-hmm. So they need the same thing, smaller amount, but they still need it.
Unless you're Maddie eating a steak.
Me and Maddie are going to go on a steak eating contest. So, you
just have to cut it for her.
Yeah. I could get somebody to cut my steak for me. I think that would be cool. But yeah, you just look at it. I think the first meal of the day, find something that is, and it doesn't even have to be like, it can literally be a smoothie if you want, like a protein smoothie. My daughter does that because my little grandson maybe doesn't want to eat first thing in the morning, and he will drink a smoothie because he gets to hold it himself, and he feels like he's doing it himself. And she lets him put the stuff in the blender or whatever, and she lets him help. And I think that's another thing. If they're old enough, let them help. It's slower, and it's sometimes super annoying. We all know that as parents. Yeah. But it is something that gives them ownership. And we always talk about ownership of your life. Kids need it too. Yeah. They need to feel that too, that they're contributing. So first meal of the day, find something that they'll eat that's protein and fat, maybe a little bit of fruit, not overboard. And then if it doesn't look like breakfast, don't let that be a deterrent, because it doesn't have to look like breakfast. If they want roast in the morning because you had pot roast last night and they like it, let them have it. It doesn't have to be breakfast. It just needs to be something that's protein and that will fuel their body right, like that protein and fat. Snacks are usually easy because usually it's just salty, crunchy. You got nuts. If your kid's not allergic to nuts, depending on their age. I think just finding little things like that that they'll eat. Like with Steven, when we changed all of our diet, taking your lunch to school was going to be a challenge. So I bought these bento boxes, lunch box, and he had everything for a sandwich but the bread, because for him, gluten was a problem. If he had gluten, he acted like, it was like Jekyll and Hyde, man. Yeah. I mean, it was like we went from a happy kid to literally you could look at him and he would start crying. Yeah. Or he'd get real angry. And so it was weird, like what we would notice with just adding or taking away gluten. Yeah, that's crazy. And so I would do the sandwich, the turkey or the ham and the cheese, but no bread. And I made it look like a sandwich, or I did it in rolls. And then I'd have a little bit of fruit, Sometimes I tried the half avocado, but it would turn colors and he wouldn't eat it. So we figured out some lower carb, non-gluten-y things that I could put in there and made it like neat. And then kids were asking like, where'd you get that? Where'd you get that lunch? If
you make it look cool, most of the time kids will eat it.
Yeah. And in fact, we had a problem with some kid in middle school was taking some of his lunch. And you know, you asked about sweets earlier, and just to be very honest with this part, we didn't have it after meal. It didn't look like cake or cookies or anything like that. But because it was like, wow, we're kind of like being the weirdos now, and we're not having bread or chips, like, you know, whatever. We switched to pork rinds. That was crunchy and that worked. But I put a piece of dark chocolate in his little lunchbox thing every day. Just one piece, one square of like really good dark chocolate. It was very low in sugar, but it was something that was like there. Yeah. Like all these other kids are eating cookies or donuts or whatever. So, you know, I did say that, you know, now, it wasn't cookies or crackers, and so, you know, I did make an allowance for that just to make it where it was a lot of change. We did. Y'all had a lot of change. We had moved back here. He had started school in public school again. I had homeschooled him for 2 years just to get the diet right and get him to where he could actually attend school and pay attention. And so at that point, I was like, we had been 2 years off sugar. At that point, I was like, the one square of dark chocolate with no dyes in it is not going to kill us. Yeah. We're going to be okay.
I love that.
And he really enjoyed it. And he, you know, until a kid took it a couple of times, and then I went up to the school and I fixed that. So we had to fix that. That's awesome. Me and Steve got called up to the school a couple of times, but you know, and that, you know, that kind of went away. But I was like, the kid just wants your lunch, you know, because it looks really good.
That's awesome. No, I think those are really easy and great next steps of like, one, meals don't have to look like what we think. Yes, in our head that we think they have to look like. Involving them in cooking, I think, is a really big thing, honestly. I think involving the kid, taking ownership of their meals is huge. I think those are all such great suggestions. So seriously, thank you.
You're welcome.
I know. I think that's the hardest thing for moms is like, we just want somebody to tell us what to do, honestly. Like, we just kind of want someone to be like, hey, try this and this and this. And like, let's go from there. Like, let's just do. And I think that's why I like you as a nutritionist in general. It's like, you give me such practical advice of like, hey, just try this and let's see how we go. Let's see how it does. And I think I just love that. It just feels attainable. It doesn't feel so like, oh, I have to eat perfect 24/7. I have to do everything perfect 24/7. It's like, hey, let's just take small steps. Let's just get going. But I think that's really good for sure.
Well, you know, like I said, they're just little people. We've got people in our nutrition challenge right now that they're ordering meals from Dale in our gym, who's doing the meal prep. They're eating the same foods all week long and having really good success. So why wouldn't that work for our kids? Yeah. If they 100%. Get stuck eating the same thing because they like it over and over, if it's steak and a sweet potato and some, you know, some vegetable and a little bit of fruit and they love it, let them have it breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Yeah. You know.
That's so good. Yeah. I think that's great. Well, seriously, thank you so much for talking to me about food and being a parent and all things nutrition. But I hope you guys enjoyed this, and I hope you got a little bit of how to kind of help your family be happier and healthier and live a healthy and full life. So thanks for joining us, and we will see you next time.